Was it fate that took you from your family and stuck you in a pleasure house in Ketterdam? Or was it just very bad luck? I'm not sure yet, she said coldly. In moments like this, she thought she might hate him. Kaz wove his way through the crowd, a shadow in a riot of color. Each of the major pleasure houses had a specialty, some more obvious than others. He passed the Blue Iris, the Bandy Cat, bearded men glowing from the window of the forge, the Obscura, the Willow Switch, the dewy-eyed blondes at the House of Snow, and of course, the Menagerie, also known as the House of Exotics, where Inej had been forced to don fake Sully silks. He spotted Tante Helene in her peacock feathers and famous diamond choker, holding court in the gilded parlor. She ran the menagerie, procured the girls, made sure they behaved. When she saw Kaz, her lips thinned to a sour line, and she lifted her glass, the gesture more a threat than toast. He ignored her and pressed on. The House of the White Rose was one of the more luxurious establishments on West Stave. It had its own dock, and its gleamed white stone facade looked less like a pleasure house than a Mercer mansion. Its window boxes were always bursting with climbing white roses, and their scent clung dense and sweet over the portion of the canal. The parlor was even stickier with perfume. Huge alabaster vases overflowed with more white roses, and men and women, some masked or veiled, some with faces bare, waited on ivory couches, sipping near colorless wine and nibbling vanilla cakes soaked in almond liqueur. The boy at the desk was dressed in a creamy velvet suit, a white rose in his buttonhole. He had white hair and eyes the color of boiled eggs. Bearing the eyes, he looked like an albino, but Kaz happened to know he'd been tailored to match the decor of the house by a certain Grisha on the payroll. "Mr. Breckard," the boy said. "Nina's with a client." Kaz nodded and slipped down the hallway behind a potted rose tree, resisting the urge to bury his nose in his collar. Uncle Felix, the bod who ran the White Rose, liked to say that his house girls were as sweet as the blossoms. But the joke was on the clients. That particular breed of White Rose, the only one hardy enough to survive the wet weather of Ketterdam, had no natural scent. All the flowers were perfumed by hand. Kaz trailed his fingers along the panels behind the potted tree and pressed his thumb into a notch in the wall. It slid open, and he climbed a corkscrew staircase that was only used by staff. Nina's room was on the 3rd floor. The door to the bedroom beside it was open, and the room unoccupied, so Kaz slipped in, moved aside his still life, and pressed his face to the wall. These peepholes were a feature of all the brothels. They were to keep their employees safe and honest, and they offered a thrill to anyone who enjoyed watching others take their pleasure. Kaz had seen enough slum dwellers seeking satisfaction in dark corners and alleys. That allure was lost on him. Besides, he knew that anyone looking through this particular peephole and hoping for excitement would be sorely disappointed. A little bald man was seated fully clothed at a round table draped in ivory baize. His hands neatly folded beside an untouched silver coffee tray. Nina Zenek stood behind him, swathed in red silk kafta that advertised her status as a Grisha heartrender. One palm pressed to his forehead, the other to the back of his neck. She was tall and built like a figurehead of a ship carved by a generous hand. They were silent, as if they'd been frozen there at the table. There wasn't even a bed in the room, just a narrow settee where Nina curled up every night. When Kaz had asked Nina why, she'd simply said, "I don't want anyone getting ideas." "A man doesn't need a bed to get ideas, Nina." Nina fluttered her lashes. "What would you know about it, Kaz? Take those gloves off, and we'll see what ideas come to mind." Kaz had kept his cool eyes on her until she dropped her gaze. He wasn't interested in flirting with Nina Zenek, and he happened to know she wasn't remotely interested in him. Nina just liked to flirt with everything. He'd once seen her make eyes at a pair of shoes she'd fancied in a shop window. Nina and the bald man sat unspeaking, as the minutes ticked by, and the hour of the clock chimed. He rose and kissed her hand. "Go," she said in solemn tones. "Be at peace." The bald man kissed her hand again, in tears in his eyes. Thank you. As soon as the client was down the hall, Kaz stepped out the bedroom and knocked on Nina's door. She opened it cautiously, keeping the chain latched. Oh, she said, when she saw Kaz. You. She didn't look particularly happy to see him. No surprise. Kaz Brecker at your door was rarely a good thing. She unhooked the chain and let him show himself in as she shucked off the red kefta, revealing a slip of satin so thin it barely counted as cloth. Saints, I hate this thing, she said, kicking the kefta away and pulling a threadbare dressing gown from a drawer. What's wrong with it? Kaz asked. It isn't made right, and it itches. The kefta was of Kirch manufacturer, not Ravkin, a costume, not a uniform. Kaz knew Nina never wore it on the streets. It was simply too risky for Grisha. Her membership in the dregs meant anyone acting against her would risk retribution from the gang, but payback wouldn't matter much to Nina if she was on a slaver ship bound for who knew where. Nina threw herself into a chair at the table and wriggled her feet out of her jeweled slippers, digging her toes into a plush white carpet. Ah, she said contentedly, so much better. She shoved one of the cakes from the coffee service into her mouth and mumbled, What do you want, Kaz? You have crumbs on your cleavage. Don't care, she said, taking another bite of cake. So hungry. Kaz shook his head, amused and impressed at how quickly Nina dropped the wise Grisha priestess act. She'd missed her true calling on the stage. Was that Van Axter the merch? Kaz asked. Yes. His wife died a month ago, and his business has been a wreck since. Now that he's visiting you, can we expect the turnaround? Nina didn't need a bed because she specialized in emotions. She dealt in joy, calm, confidence. More Grisha corporal key, focused on the body. To kill or to cure. But Nina had needed a job that would keep her in Ketterdam and out of trouble. So instead of risking her life and making major money as a mercenary, she slowed heartbeats, eased breathing, relaxed muscles. She had a lucrative side business as a tailor, seeing to the wrinkles and jowls of the wealthy Kirch. But her chief source of income came from altering moods. People came to her lonely, grieving, sad for no reason, and left buoyed. Their anxieties eased. The effect didn't last long, but sometimes just the illusion of happiness was enough to make her clients feel like they could face another day. Nina claimed it had something to do with glands, but Kaz didn't care about the specifics as long as she showed up when he needed her, and she paid Pascal his percentage on time. I expect you'll see a change, Nina said. She finished off the last cake, licking her fingers with relish, then set the tray outside the door and rang for a maid. Van Axter started coming at the end of last week, and has been here every day since. Excellent. Kaz made a mental note to buy some of the low stock in Van Axter's company. Even if the man's mood shift was the result of Nina's handiwork, business would pick up. He hesitated, then said, You make him feel better, ease his woe and all that. But could you compel him to do something? Maybe make him forget his wife. Alter the pathways of the mind? Don't be absurd. The brain is just another organ, Kaz said, quoting Van Eyck. Yes, but it's an incredibly complex one. Controlling or altering another person's thoughts. Well, it's not like lowering a pulse rate or releasing a chemical to improve someone's mood. There are too many variables. No Grisha is capable of it. Yet, Kaz amended, you treat the symptom, not the cause. She shrugged. He's avoiding the grief, not treating it. If I'm his solution, he'll never really get over her death. Will you send him on his way then? Advise him to find a new wife and stop darkening your door. She ran a brush through her light brown hair and glanced at him in the mirror. Does Pascal have plans to forgive my debt? None at all. Well then, Van Axter must be allowed to grieve in his own way. I have another client scheduled in half an hour, Kaz. What business? Your client will wait. What do you know about Yurta Perem? Nina shrugged. There are rumors, but they sound like nonsense to me. With the exception of With the exception of the Council of Tides, the few Grisha working in Ketterdam all knew each other and exchanged information readily. Most were on the run from something, eager to avoid drawing the attention of slaver or interest from the Ravkan government. They aren't just rumors. Squallers flying, tide makers turning to mist, fabricators making gold from lead. He reached into his pocket and tossed the lump of yellow to her. It's real. Fabricators make textiles. They fuss around with metals and fabrics. They can't turn one thing into another. She held the lump up to the light. You could have got this anywhere, she said, as she had argued to Van Eyck. She said, just as he had argued to Van Eyck a few hours earlier. Without being invited, Kaz sat down on the plush settee and stretched out his bad leg. Your Prem is real, Nina. And if you're still the good little Grisha soldier I think you are, you'll want to hear what it does to people like you. She turned the lump of gold over in her hands, then wrapped her dressing gown more tightly around her and curled up at the end of the settee. Again, Kaz marveled at the transformation. In these rooms, she played the part her clients wanted to see, the powerful Grisha, serene in her knowledge. But sitting there with her brow furrowed and her feet tucked under her, she looked like what she truly was, a girl of 17, raised in the sheltered luxury of the little palace, far from home and barely getting by every day. Tell me, she said. Kaz talked. He held back on the specifics of Van Eyck's proposal, but he told her about Bo-Yul-Bayur, Yurda Prem, and the addictive properties of the drug, placing particular emphasis on the recent theft of Ravkan military documents. If this is all true, then Bo-Yul-Bayur needs to be eliminated. That's not the job, Nina. This isn't about money, Kaz. It was always about money, but Kaz knew a different kind of pleasure was required. Nina loved her country and loved her people. She still believed in the future of Ravka and in the Second Army, the Grisha military elite that had nearly disintegrated during the Civil War. Nina's friends back in Ravka, she believed, was dead, a victim of fury and witch hunters, and for now, she wanted it to stay that way. But Kaz knew she'd hoped to return one day. Nina, we're going to retrieve Bo-Yul-Bayur, and I need a Korpelnik to do it. I want you on my crew. Wherever he's hiding out, once you find him, letting him live would be the most outrageous kind of irresponsibility. My answer is no. He isn't hiding out. The Furyans have him at the ice court. Nina paused. Then he's as good as dead. The Merchant Council doesn't think so. They wouldn't be going to this trouble of offering up this kind of reward if they thought he'd been neutralized. Van Eyck was worried. I could see it. The merchant you spoke to. Yes, he claims their intelligence is good. If it's not, well, I'll take the hit. But if Bo-Yul-Bayur is alive, someone is going to try and break him out of the ice court. Why shouldn't it be us? The ice court, Nina repeated. And Kaz knew she'd begun to put the pieces together. You don't just need a Korpelnik, do you? No, I need someone who knows the court inside and out. She leapt to her feet and began pacing, hands on hips, dressing gown flapping. You're a little skiv, you know that? How many times have I come to you begging for you to help Matthias, and now that you want something? Per Haskell isn't running a charity. Don't put this on the old man, she snapped. If you'd wanted to help me, you know you could have. And why would I do that? She rolled on him. Because... When have I ever done something for nothing, Nina? She opened her mouth, closed it again. Do you know how many favors I would have to call in? How many bribes I've had to pay to get Matthias Helvar out of prison? The price was too high. And now, she managed, her eyes still blazing anger. Now, Helvar's freedom is worth something. He held up a hand to cut her off. Worth something to me. Nina pressed her fingers to her temples. Even if you could get it to him, Matthias would never agree to help you. It's just a question of leverage, Nina. You don't know him. Don't I? He's a person like any other, driven by greed and pride and pain. You should understand that better than anyone. Helvar is driven by honor, and only honor. You can't bribe or bully that. That may have been true once, Nina, but it's a very long year. been a very long year. Helvar is much changed. You've seen him? Her green eyes were wide, eager. There, thought Kaz. The barrel hasn't beaten the hope out of you yet. I have. Nina took a deep, shuddering breath. He wants his revenge, Kaz. That's what he wants, not what he needs, Kaz said. Leverage is all about knowing the difference.